Welcome back. We are back. It's Wednesday, and we are in the rally room, formerly the women's lounge. So, if you have tuned in before, we're back. It's Wednesday. It is 2026. It's the start of a new year and a lot of chaos going on. So, the rally room is where we continue to meet every week, every Wednesday, with episodes launching on Friday. So, if you're feeling like 2025 was a funk that wouldn't follow us, you were wrong. The funk is following us straight into the new year. You're not alone in thinking that. Yeah, 2026 is going to be challenging for most of us. So there was no reset button. No clean slate, but here we are. So, same systems, same harm that's happening to our communities, and everyone is carrying the weight. So, whew, we're going to take a breath. We're going to take a breath to make sure that we're grounded and we understand what's at stake, what are the challenges, but also what we need to do to move forward. Sometimes it's taking a step back. And when you're ready to engage, we're going to be here in the rally room. So, what I want to say clear from the start is that we cannot let them decide how this year goes. It's our decision, and what we choose to engage in should be joy, should be activism, and it should be centered around women's rights. Yes, I said it. So that's what we're going to do with the rally room. So today's episode is heavy for a new year. But we're going to sit through this together, name what's happening, and connect the dots. And really, that's what we're going to do at the rally point at the end. So we're looking at remembrance. Today's Wednesday, January the 7th, and today marks 1 year since the Palisades and Altadena fires. I'm in Los Angeles, and I was really close to it. We hosted drives and give back to the families that were impacted, fire survivors, as we're currently naming it. So while the news cycle moved on, many families have not. People are still displaced, still fighting insurance companies or waiting on permits to rebuild, and maybe not rebuilding or have moved on. What we do know is that disaster recovery didn't end and doesn't end when the cameras leave. We're also talking about climate. What will that look like? Because it didn't hit everyone equally. So if anybody remembers, the fires hit Palisades, which is a really affluent area in Los Angeles, and it also hit Altadena. Altadena is more towards Pasadena, and it was different. You went from Palisade folks being displaced, and most of them, a lot of them, very wealthy. And Altadena, we're looking at a higher level of more of a middle income family structure there. So the rebuilding of it has looked different in either areas. And so what I want to say is that we want to honor everyone, and we want to honor anybody that has been affected, regardless of whether you were in Altadena or you were in Palisades, because all of it has been devastating. So we don't want to minimize what has happened to everyone. Yesterday was the 1 year anniversary of what happened at the Capitol, right? The insurrection, the failed coup. So there's a lot of energy coming around. What does democracy look like? What does displacement look like? And what does it look like when the trauma stretches across years, not moments? And what's it going to take to rebuild? So we're dealing with a lot of that. We've had some questions also sent to us, and I'll get to those at the end of the podcast, but we do have questions from the audience that were sent via Instagram. So if you're new to this, we are the Rally Room. It is a podcast hosted by myself, Emiliana. I am your host, and it is a project of Women's March Foundation. And that is how we started. So welcome back to the Rally Room. All right. in this segment of the Rally Room, we're talking about displacement and state violence. We touched upon the honoring the fire survivors in California from Palisades to Altadena, but we were also talking about what is currently happening. Well, some families were displaced by fire. Others are being displaced by force. So this morning we read that ICE and the Department of Homeland Security, so an ICE agent shot a woman in her car in Minneapolis. The woman was a volunteer. So authorities claim that she was weaponizing her vehicle against an ICE agent, and I want to pause on that. Pause on the language that she was weaponizing her vehicle while clearly the ICE agent had a weapon and used it and fatally shot a woman in her vehicle. So I want to talk about what that looks like and what has been happening, because this isn't isolated. It isn't rare. This is part of the system of policing people of color. This is part of the system of state violence, because that's what it is. And it's not rare. So they are now using fear weapons to enforce. So the federal government claims that it has arrested over 300,000 immigrants. And when we talk about that, let's talk about how that has been done. And it has been by force, it has been by intimidation. And what the statistics show us is that the majority, and the data shows it, the majority of the detained have no criminal record. Yes, I said that. So the majority detained have no criminal record. And what they sold us on was that they were going to go after criminals. And yet we have a criminal in the White House as president, 34-time convicted felon as a president. That's a fact. So when we talk about criminals, let's talk about what that really is. They are detaining folks, many of them, while they wait for their permits. Many are following the process. Many are detained after their immigration appointments in the courthouses or prior to their appointments. So many have done nothing wrong except they are people of color. Let's name it. It is that you are brown skinned, you may look Latino, and you may be in the wrong place at the wrong time. That is what we are dealing with. And this is what no one is talking about. You should not be in fear of doing the right thing when you go to court on your immigration permit or the process. As you are following the process, you may get arrested. And so everyone's thing is they need to do it the right way. At this point, there is no right way. At this point, if you are brown, you are presumed guilty of being a criminal, even though you are not. That's what we're dealing with here. So let's call it what it is. It's racist. It's just racism we are dealing with. And I don't want to just say just, it is racism, right? As an immigrant woman, as a Latina, brown, the regime that we have currently is a racist regime. People are being arrested, detained, based on what they look like. That's a racist regime. So we need to ask the hard questions. Remember, this is the administration that brought in the Latino vote. So the hard question is within our communities and within our families is, how did we get fooled? How did we get to a point that we voted for someone that refuses to acknowledge us as human beings, that spoke about us in such terms that were so dehumanizing that you would never speak to even your worst enemy as that? So how do we get fooled? How? I think I have an idea. I think many Latinos receive disinformation, and the Latino vote is one of the youngest voter. The Latino voters is one of the youngest voters. Most of the time, they're first generation voters. So I think a lot of disinformation was out there. So I'll give that. But also, how did we vote for a president whose policies continue to tear families apart? Remember, in 2018, uh, they were separating families. In 2018, we had children lost across the country. We still have over 1,000 children that were never reunited with their families in 2018. And yet, our folks voted for this again. At what cost? At what cost? Like, the cost is just too high. It's too high. We're paying it in fear, the separation, the chaos, the trauma with families, all due and based on the color of our skin. So the conversation we know doesn't end here. We've got to continue to monitor it. I am sending strength, love for the family members of the woman that was shot dead. We won't name her because we need to make sure that we have all the details. But we understand and know that ICE is going to continue their reign of terror, that they will continue to arrest, but also feed us lies around how they're doing it, how many folks are being arrested, what their records are, but more importantly, continue to lie and continue to not tell the truth to the public on how they are doing it. So there's an accountability piece here that continues to evade the administration. So here we are. I want to make sure that we continue to stay on this because it is families, it is women that will continue to be affected by what is happening with ICE in the country. There is a bright spot. There is a bright spot. A federal court has ruled, and the government has listened. Yes, has listened. So the governor in California, the governor in Illinois, and other states have pulled the military out of the states and have given it back to the governor. So there's a bright spot there. At least there is a little bit less militarization on the streets. So right now, our key point is to continue to talk about and tell the stories of the immigration enforcement that is happening, known as ICE, that is happening in the streets, and make sure that we don't stay silent on it, and make sure that we continue to tell the stories that this is happening in the United States. All right. This brings me to the rally point. And of course, questions and more conversation. So I know we started with heavy topics and survival and trauma, but we're going to continue. So the rally point today is continuing talking about the administration and what the current administration, led by the President Donald Trump, is doing. So at this point, we're looking at the current announcement of the administration withholding federal child care and family assistance and funding from 5 states. And surprising no one, these are what's considered blue states. Democrats run these states. So there's a clear agenda with the administration to really pull funding around states that are led by Democrats. So we're talking about California, Colorado, Illinois, Minnesota, and New York. So the decision comes from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. It cites vague and unproven allegations of fraud to the point that Tim Walz, who is the governor of one of the states, who's the governor of Minnesota and previously ran as the vice president with Kamala Harris, has decided to not run for a third term in Minnesota based on what is happening here. So the Department of Health and Human Services has talked about fraud. Some of the allegations still have not proven, but let's be clear on what it does. So what it does is it's supposed to punish the governors. That's not who it punishes. Let's be real. It doesn't. It does not punish the governors. It punishes taxpayers. It punishes families. And it doesn't stop fraud. It doesn't. And it punishes children. It punishes women. It punishes children. All of this from the pro life party. How can you be pro life and defund healthcare, education, define childcare? So the pro life isn't about pro life, it is about controlling women. Um, so what this all this means when they defund childcare. So the program helps parents afford daycare so they can work or go to school. The program helps families buy diapers, clothes, food. They are lifelines. They are lifelines. As we know, we currently have very little child care accessibility for women in the United States. And so, what we do know is that it's a hypocrisy. It's hypocrisy. And it's something we can't ignore, and we have to call it out. There is nothing pro life about what is happening. So, they're defunding child's care, which means that right now it gives us a clear view of what they value. And it isn't women and it isn't children because they are starving families when they defund childcare. So, what we do know is that we're hoping that the governors and the states have some type of wraparound service that will continue to help these families while the Department of Health and Human Services does a clear investigation. But really, it's not punishing the governors. It's not punishing the folks that are defrauding if that is found. And I'm saying defrauding because all of it is very vague. And so we've got to make sure that we hold them accountable. We can't pretend that they're protecting children. So we must make sure that these children are not used as political pawns in these states and let's keep it real. Let's keep it 100. What is happening here, and it's a clear connection that these states they've enshrined abortion rights and reproductive rights in their states. One. Two, that these states are run from Democrats. So we're either going to be the United States or we're not. You cannot name yourself the president of the United States while only defunding Democrats and what are considered blue states. We'll leave it there. But also, let's talk about what pro-life means, right? So does pro-life mean only caring when it's a fetus, when a woman has a choice? Or does pro-life mean that you're funding what happens after birth? Because that is where the care needs to begin. We need to care about children. We need to care about women beyond just the pregnancy. And that is what the pro-life movement has never done good with. Defunding education, childcare, healthcare for women is not pro-life. It is anti-woman. Let's name it that. So hopefully some of these families will continue to work through what they need to work through so that they aren't struggling. Hopefully, they are able to feed their children, to house them, and to care for them as parents beyond what this government wants for them. You cannot care for families and be pro-life while defunding them at the same time. So that's what we say. So I am going to now go through some questions that have been asked of us from the rally room to the women's lounge. All right. So we talked about fire displacement, immigration terror, how it affects families, how it affects women. Just today, a woman was shot in Minneapolis. And so I want to make sure that we talk about that is police state violence. So now a few questions. Amy, how do you connect the dots with all of this? Well, we connect the dots by understanding that none of this is accidental. This was in Project 2025, defunding childcare, defunding healthcare. And what we are seeing was all part of the plan in Project 2025 I will make sure we put links in so that you can read at what section we're in. But this is still part of Project 2025. It's connected. It is not disconnected. So what they underestimated, in our opinion, was that community has a memory and community will continue to resist what is happening. So yes, all of these things, from defunding childcare to defunding healthcare for women, from the fall of all of this was in Project 2025. This is where we're at. But we remember, we organize, and we will continue to protect each other. Second question. Yes, there is a second question. Are you marching? When are you marching? So we are not marching on January 20th. And I know there's chatter around that. In Los Angeles, we are not hosting a march. We will be hosting a live podcast in the rally room talking about where we are in Project 2025, where we are going as part of the resistance beyond marching, beyond silence. So that is what we're going to be doing on January 20th. We will continue to look at where we are, Project 2025, but also talk through what is currently happening with Venezuela, what has happened. The United States has extradited the President Maduro. He is currently in custody in New York along with his wife, a dictator. Maduro is a dictator. None of us should be happy that that has happened, and not because we support a dictator, but because the policies around foreign policy are not clearly followed. We are currently holding a dictator, but the dictator's VP is still running Venezuela. So we cannot clearly say, well, we've toppled a dictatorship. We have not. So no one should be happy about what is happening because it may mean war. We don't know if Venezuela is going to play ball as the president wants. And what it looks like from the outside and the inside is that it is an oil fight. So it doesn't look like it's about dictatorship. Why? Because the VP is still running that country. And the president has stated, President Trump has stated that the United States will be running Venezuela. How? How will we be running Venezuela when we currently are defunding childcare here, are defunding education here? We cannot allow this president to take away our rights in the United States with fear-mongering. That's what it is. So, no, we're not happy about a dictator being taken down in Venezuela. We are asking the questions about foreign policy. Why wasn't Congress informed? We are asking about due process again throughout this administration. It is about due process and following the rule of law. All right. Woo! That brings us to our closing point. If you are still here, thank you for joining me. I'm Emiliana Guereca, your host at the Rally Room. Join us next week as we continue to talk through. Send us your questions as we continue the conversation around what's important beyond marching, what's important for women. Every issue is a woman's issue. I will see you next week. And of course, on January 20th, and a live episode. So send me questions in the rally room. See you soon.